This particular session is called Sing to Me, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Mani Rao and Alison James. Mani Rao has 10 collections of poetry, including new and selected poems that's been published by Poetry. Sing to Me, which of course is the title of this particular session event, which has been published by Recent Workplace, as well as two books of translation from Sanskrit, including Kalidasa for the 21st Century Reader, which has come out through Aleph. She has taught creative writing and has held residencies multiple places, including the world-renowned Iowa IWP and the International Poetry Studies Institute in Canberra, as well as Homiletic House. And today, Mani is joined in conversation by Alison James. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, Mani.
Hi.
It's nice to see you. Yes, so I'm looking forward to our conversation. So Mani, you're a poet, you're a translator, you're also a scholar in the field of religious studies. So I think there's a lot we can talk about. So perhaps talking about the relationship between all of these aspects of your work. But I'd like to start by inviting you to read some of your own poetry, perhaps including some selections from Sing to Me, which has given its title to this session, but also from some of your other collections. So over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I don't know how I'm going to make sense of the relationship between the three parts, and sort of the project of coherence is, I do have a narrative that does stitch it together. But yeah, let's begin with some poetry. Shall I start with something from echolocation, and then just two or three from three different collections? That's what I selected. Okay, so now this is a rather short poem. Many of my poems tend to be short. It doesn't have a title. This is from this book called Echolocation. I don't know, you can see this in the camera or this way. Okay. The demon and the dog whirl in space. The knives are out, flashing and shame. She makes you eat spit. And he who gives you shelter is already a refugee. She's a carrier for screams fortified with use. And he has lost his fuck. Everyone is innocent, contagious. I don't have any introductions or background information for that poem. That was the opening poem of Echolocation. And then the next poem, also no title for it. I chose this for today because it seems to always be popular. It's been anthologized widely, including in Penguin's Book of the Prose Poem. The sky is fitted linen stretched over sea line without a crease, pegged to the spikes and jags of mountains, king-size navy preparing to be sunshot. Sooner than lovers can hide, no sooner than the taste of stars striking your lips one by one, stunned and falling to light. It's all been said, and yet need blowing between our lips, streams inside a tree. We flowed out of time and back so soon, eating eggs our own. Through each other we pass like water. At the sun to see how it never changes, at the moon to see how it does. Algae slipping beneath our feet, roots traveling and dewdrops dying in visible speed. There is no such thing as a circular river. Unlike bread, the body becomes softer with age. We tag our children with our names, store the plates of our daughters, stash berries under rocks, and look for them later. Held in the fangs of a wristwatch, a well-worn path of a nail in our veins, heart-hammered time trail. No matter who two are kissing, eternity arrives. Jelly bean, ice black, crystal balls. The longer we look, the more we recognize, and anything we could say is too obvious. The songs we like are the songs we know, and every song on the radio is about us. I can see you're scribbling away questions.
I was just thinking about some of the. So, I'll let you, Jai, let you go on. Or do you want to talk about this collection for a little bit, the echolocation? Um,
I'm sorry, you want to talk about the collection?
would you like to go on, or would you like to talk about this collection for a moment, the echolocation?
So this was written primarily in maybe 2001 or 2002, published in 2003, and then went out of print and then came back into print. Now it's out from Math Paper Press in 2014. They are all poems. Well, I don't know what they're about. They're about life, I guess. I mean, that's the silliest answer I can give you. um, echolocation in the sense, I guess it was a time for me of some kind of reckoning of sort of bringing everything together. A somewhat larger canvas seems to have come out of that, and I think I was discovering something new, about myself, about the world. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but yeah, so it was a broad scale. There was no particular topic that I was writing to. There are no titles to the poems. You see, they're all like sort of each on a different page in the book. I do think this is one of my most intense collections of poetry. Um, Even though it follows the same style of very condensed and no extra word type of style, there's not even line breaks. It's just all like looks like a prose poem, but of course, when you utter it, it sounds more rhythmic. It has a cadence to it. Yeah. I had one more poem I wanted to read from echolocation. This one is easier to summarize, I guess, because it speaks about language. Um, Words, tags, tracks, cartography, telling a mountain by its outline, a river by its turns, joining the dots, revising distances, placing things, turning points, and stop signs. When you know the word for it, call off the detectives. Monkeys, we leap from word to word, thick with meaning. Spiders, our words are resilient webs. We make snares in the color of air, sweet smelling and sticky. Please do not say a single word expressed dead. You have my word. So that is actually probably also an answer to your question about say something about the book.
Yes, I mean, that was the poem I found it was easiest to connect to the title of the book, the question of location and tracking and naming as well. I thought that was fascinating, the idea of but naming a location is also a way, naming and locating things is also a way of losing things. I thought that was a interesting
Yeah,
term.
echolocation also as in the resonance of whale signals where they find themselves, the navigation system.
Yes. No,
And then I had a few poems from Ghostmasters I selected. Shall I just proceed with
yes,
readings and then we can chat about them?
go
Yeah?
ahead.
Okay. So I chose a couple of bird related poems. This poem, it's called So That You Know. And I wrote it when at one particular point when I was sitting around in a balcony, thinking, reading, and I would look on these trees, on the treetops, and see all these birds come in and go out, morning and at dawn and dusk. So this draws a lot of the imagery from what I was looking at. so that you know, trimming the overgrown silences of the night, scissor beaks. It may be early, unlit, but the birds have begun to boil, buds are growing wings, and the tree will rise feather-born. One row of birds, like a stem by pinnet, will curve nicely to the breeze. One large bunch will turn like a wheel and then somersault. You will see a crashing tree, root fist twisting up, cumulus head rolling down. Blackbirds will burst, a packet of tacks. A stork quadrant will appear with the mythical carpet. Chirping chandeliers will swing in from the sky in time for dusk. So, another poem, and this is called Location, also from Ghostmasters. This was out in 2010. Hiding in a tree trunk, looking through the hollows, furs in new wedding gowns, fire budding Christmas trees. It was the trees jangling interior bangles. Tigers striped past silently. Rugs on the floor of salvation wood. The first time I saw ginseng, I understood the body to be root. Until a slice of what I could only call steak wood. The river swears its blue will carry you across soon as you leap in fast moving coils. Who set the pythons dead? Where is the hatch? Somewhere here, but giant roots flowed over. Is it sealed? Bloody me. Will we keep? Gone too far, free out at sea, why does the water wave as if pining for the ties of Shiva's braids? The tangles at the fountainhead. From here, the view of the dance. Okay, another one, and this is the one that you liked, the 5-word poem. So I hope you're counting how many words there are. Those love cannot leave alone. Love those cannot leave alone. Cannot love. Leave those alone. Leave those cannot love alone. Those cannot leave love alone. Okay, and the last poem from Ghostmasters. This is this also has no title. It has a number of statements that I just thought, this is what I know, so I'm going to write it. Om is a super constellation. Water sticks together. Pain is a verb. Death is not. Wrong is a place. Love has no opposite. Perfection is a being. A dream with more pixels stays longer in the memory. If there was no fear, there would be no objects. To be blessed, sneeze. There is knowledge, and there is the memory of that knowledge by which we continue to regard as true what we have known to be true. The dewdrop knows how to roll on a razor's edge, but sometimes a false step. She was looking for provenance to my words as if it would help her decide if I shrieked, "Nuts, they're free, fell from a tree." Some aliens will eat flesh in the hope of becoming flesh. This is a chair. You may as well sit on it. It's no good as firewood. So that's some poems from Ghostmasters. And then I've chosen two poems from Sing to Me. This is the one that Avik has chosen for the title of our session. This is the opening poem. Sing to Me is our poems commenting on, taking off on Greek myths. Sing to Me. There's a title poem. Oh, muses, excuse this nondescript call. I wonder who among you apt, who interested? Greek and Sanskrit, a must. I mean, not words, spaces where two species, gods, humans, intersect. O Calliope, Erato, Thalia, Clio, Melpomena, Urania, Euterpe, Polyhymnia, Terpsichore, Magic Nine, all girl cast. Dad voluptuary, stepmother hung by the heels, constant news of half sisters, mother in deep glue. When family is this dish, your friends are poets. Mount Parnassus set your Apollo dance, Sappho plays on, trade for a tradition, Homer restless, Ovid morbid, Blake who met Ezekiel, Dante, Virgil. Come 1, 2, 3, 9, take turns if you tire. Your Kali for Kalidasa, Ganesha for Vyasa, for Lorca Duende, for Merrill, a red-winged bat. Welcome the Furies, Alecto, Megara, Tisiphone, justices of peace. We'll need them too. Around orchards Grecian, on battlefields Trojan, in Shiva's realm, inside Hanuman's heart, gods are us. And the next final poem is called Peace Treaty. Um, it's a comment on Helen of Troy. What if Helen died? What if Helen died? Cuckold crows, husband recalls, body, face, rights. Once broad Trojan devils now cower in the shadows of walls, fearing sky witnesses quaking at bird shit. Our boy came back from overseas with a souvenir egg that ticked. A runaway wife's a rotten prize, unwanted, alive, and dead.
Thank you, Mani, for this introduction to your work. So I know I promised earlier when we spoke on the phone that I wouldn't ask you too much about mythology or cast you as a mythology specialist, but I am curious about the project you take on in Sing to Me of bringing together Greek mythology, actually mostly Greek mythology, but also Hindu mythology. Um, as you say, Greek and Sanskrit are must at the beginning. So can you say, I wonder if you could say something about the relationship between these different mythologies for you? Do you see them as essentially having the same relationship to us? As you say, the gods are us, and that covers all of the gods of all these different mythologies, or do you see differences? How do these two bodies of stories come together?
Um, for me, they're both in my head. That's the first thing, because I was very fascinated by Greek myths when I was much younger. And of course, Indian myths were just in the background because I was raised in India. So they were both very much part of my information. I mean, I have read Icelandic sagas and I've read a bunch of other, narratives from other cultures, but these are the two that really seem to have grown in my mind as like a whole body of, not body, like a world, and there are many commonalities between them. And I'm completely always struck by the contrasts also. Well, there's the sky as a location. You have, Indra, and then you have Zeus. You have the idea of nature, which is sort of embodied and personified in some deities. The relationship between humans and deities, that's the thing that really most fascinates me. How they intervene and try to create change in human affairs, and how humanity turns to the gods. And I see both as two species, like an interspecies relationship. There's dialogue, there's a deal between the two types. And then there are of course heroes born to parents, one of whom might be human and one might be a devta. So that's a common theme, and I find that almost as if there was a time when that was the case, where there was communication between these two worlds. um, it feels so real. It feels so real. And in both of these mythologies, that's what comes through. I find myself more free to have more fun in the poems related to Greek myths. I don't know why. Maybe that's obviously a sense of distance, or maybe I feel that I ought to have a little bit more piety, or if not piety, at least watch my tongue when it comes to Indian gods. But and also the fact that maybe Greek gods, and they're not, it's not so much of a living tradition as the Indian gods are. So perhaps that's the reason why I really tap into that, the satire. I'm able to see where the irony is, where's the humor, where's the sadness. If you read Ovid, of course, you can't help but really sense how satirical it is, and what a critique it is of the gods and of hierarchies.
Yes, there's a lot of humour in this collection as well. I think a kind of irreverent approach to these myths, but I really enjoy that. And there's also this element of critique, which I think you see in the Helen poem. So
Yeah, no,
could you say?
it was an enjoyable collection to write. Yeah.
So you were talking about intensity earlier in relationship to echolocation, and I would say I find your poetry as a whole is a very intense experience, as a reader, because but you have these very striking images. On the one hand, I'm thinking of the sky, like stretched linen, sky spitted linen. That's the image, or the image of the kind of ticking egg of Helen, which is so striking, which is of course a way of referring back to the history later in the Swan and all these, but also the idea of ticking time bomb, the ticking bomb. So the way you have these really striking images that kind of grab the reader, and then the poem will swerve off in another direction. So it's a little bit. So it's very striking poetry. But it's also I think you're also constantly disorienting the reader in a way, which is it's very compelling. So
Yeah,
um,
it moves fast. Yeah, it moves very fast. Yeah.
yeah. It moves very fast. You're always in this. This is why I was thinking about location and echolocation, but also kind of disorientation that happens as you're reading. Um, so you have an interesting comment actually. This is in your book on mantras. You talk about being influenced by French rather than Indian literature, and of course I'm a professor of French literature, so this was of interest to me. Could you say a little bit about that to your French influences?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's right. I was so happy to read your bio and to know that we were going to have a conversation, and that this would set up an acquaintance between us because of my interest in French literature. But I have not read anything in French. I've only read it in translation, and primarily it was the poets, Baudelaire, Rimbaud, and then it was also Jean Genet, it was Henri Michaud, it was Colette, it was that whole, and Lautréamont, and I just totally adored the whole. I guess a spirit of freedom that seemed to attract me in French literature. And I was also reading about French art, and those times in the 1930s, 1940s, and what actually the community was like. Whereas in India, because the language that I knew was just English, you know, I was not, I can't write in any other language. I do know Telugu, but I speak Telugu, but not in a very, I can't really read fast. I know the alphabets, which I've only studied. I've only become literate in Telugu in the last 10 years. I was growing up, English is my language of thought. It's my first language, So, so I don't think I absorbed any literature from India through books and poetry, except when Penguin started doing all those translations. Then I was, of course, turning to them to understand something about literature from India. But for some reason, French literature just sucked me in, and that's what I was very, very attracted to. And it was not only that, it was also film. I was really so much into cinema. I used to live in Bombay, and at the NCPA, they would show all these films every weekend, and I would just go there. And then whenever there were film festivals, I was watching 4 films, 5 films. It was European cinema that really influenced me.
Thinking about which I think I see in some of your images, like the sky one that I mentioned, or the kind of symbolist tradition that comes through in that use of imagery. But I don't know if it's a conscious influence or if that's
Yeah,
just something that's come from
yeah.
you.
Even though I had actually never been outside India until I was I 20, in my 20s, in my early 20s. I think it was only 1990, that would be when I was 25, that I first went to London and Paris. And of course, walked around Paris in a complete daze, went to Shakespeare and Company and all those very iconic things. Yeah, no. So it was happening through literature and cinema for me.
So I also wanted to talk about translation because you have translated, I think actually you have 3 books that you translated from Sanskrit, including a recent one, Sandaria Lahari, sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing. Um, but uh, I guess before hearing from some of your translation, I just wanted to hear a little bit about how you see the relationship between your translation work and your work as a poet.
I'm interested in poetry primarily. I think I still see myself primarily as a poet. And what I have translated actually is poetry. I've translated the Bhagavad Gita, it's a poem. I've translated Soundarlari, it's a poem. I've translated Kalidasa, who, even though he's written plays, actually he's really primarily a poet. So, I mean, the link is very much poetry. And it's Sanskrit, that's the other language that I know. And then the fascination with the early India and knowledges from before, what is it that we can learn from what people used to know. That's sort of some kind of theme in my mind, which is also why that whole PhD in religious studies. In fact, I was researching mantras, and mantras kind of is in the area of religious studies. It should be in the area of literature also, but it is in the area of religious studies, and that's I had to learn that entire context. Um, so yeah, I've answered your question about scholarship as well, because it was primarily to research mantras that I was attracted to start a PhD program. But so the translation, the latest one, which is called Soundaralari, this is what it looks like. Have I shown it properly? Yeah. So this is apparently most likely written by Adi Shankara, who is most likely an 8th century a CE voice. And it's canonical in the sense that it's a tantric text. It's used in tantric puja. It's meant to be. It's meant as an homage to Shakti, the primordial goddess, So it's devotional. At the same time, it is a tantric hymn because it makes references to. I'm trying to think of how to really simplify this for the audience when I explain this. It makes references to the yantra, the Sri yantra, which is the an iconic form of the goddess, and also to the chakras and to the movement of the kundalini through the chakras to the Sahasrara chakra in the Devi's body. And it's in 100 stanzas, it's a description of the physical form of Shakti, the goddess, who is the counterpart to Shiva. And it's also a mantra, it's a mala mantra, it's a garland mantra. Every stanza is supposed to be a mantra, and there are little legends about the effects of each of these stanzas. So for the ritualistic side, people will do repetition, that is japa, of each of the stanzas, accompanied with rituals such as drawing the yantra that belongs to that particular mantra. I hope I'm not sort of becoming vague now for those who don't know the subject, but they will draw the yantra and then they will put the seed syllable in between in the diagram and then do japa for it. So there's a whole ritualistic methodology that goes with it, but it's actually a fantastic poem and really fascinating. It's got very interesting imagery about because it describes goddess from head to toe in the second part of the poem, and then there's all these very very personal tone, intimate sort of entreaties from the poet to the goddess, really asking her to take one look at him, to give him a glance, etc. So I'll read you like just two or three stanzas so you get a feel for this, because otherwise if I start talking, it can just go on forever about this. So this is actually my latest book, Soundaralari, and it's 100 stanzas. In some versions of this text, it has 103 stanzas. The concept is that Shakti is the primary power in the universe, and that everything is her manifestation. That's the main concept behind this poem. Only when with her can he stir Shakti, she's Shiva's power. Even Shiva, who is a god, only prevails when paired with her. Then how can I, mere I, never did a good deed, meritless I, how dare I even bow to you, even praise you, you whom even the gods Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma adore? So in Sanskrit, it's usually sung Shiva Shaktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Shakta Prabhavitum Na Chedevam Devo Na Khalu Kushala Spanditumapi Atastvamadhyam Harihara Virinchadibhirapi Pranantum Stotum Va Kathamakruta Punya Prabhavati. So even though I'm not a singer, I thought I should sing that so you kind of have a feel for how it's usually sung. People memorize this verse and they just repeat it and they sing it. There's a whole musical tradition behind this poem. And then the stanza that you really liked, stanza 45, which talks about her hair. Her hair as in the goddess's hair. Locks naturally curly like lovely baby bees surrounding your face mock the mud-born lotus. In a slight smile, teeth neat as lotus stamens madden with their fragrance the honey liquor eyes, bee eyes of Shiva that burned Kama. So there's obviously the reference to the legend. At the same time, it's really describing her hair, which is soft and you can imagine the soft curls and the light brownish curls of baby bees sort of swirling around her face. So that's like two verses from Soundardari. And
Yes, a
then,
lot happens with the hair. At another point, the hair is a path, or the parting of the hair is a path. So, yeah.
yeah. And then the beginning of the Gita, that's what you were interested in. Yes, so should I read?
Yes. Cool. That sounds good. Or whatever selection from that you'd like us.
Okay, so now this is the Gita. Actually, a new edition is going to be out from HarperCollins this year, maybe September or October, with a longer introduction and with Sanskrit on the left side, and Roman diacritics, etc., etc. So the first chapter is the one that's really dramatic in the sense that it sets the whole scene and describes the armies that are rallied on two sides of in this battlefield. And the whole scene is being narrated by Sanjaya, and he's narrating the scene to an older king called Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra to Sanjaya. And when it came to that, might right face off what happened, who did what? Sanjaya to Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana took in the enemy lineup and said to Dronacharya, "No thanks to you, professor, trained by you, Drishtadyumna, chief of the other side, has put it together. A who's who of heroes, each a Bhim and Arjun. Yudhana, Virata, Drupada, Drishtaketu, Chekitana, and the king of Kashi. Purujit, Kunti Bhoj, Bulish, Saibya, Yudhamanyu, Uttamaujas, Abhimanyu, and the famous five sons of Draupadi. Not that we're less prepped. We've got Bhishma and Karna and Kripacharya and Ashwathama and Vikarna and the Somadatta's sons and all sorts of weapons at their fingertips for their sake, for my sake, their life on the line. And yet it's not enough. Our might to their might, our might guarded by Bhishma, to their might guarded by Bhima. So in every move, stick to your roles, keep your head, Bhishma, safe. Grand Lion Bhishma bellowed, yeah, and blew his conch erupt. His troops took it up on drums and cymbals and trumpets. What a riot! Until from a sleek chariot on two white steeds leapt unearthly sound. Krishna's Panchajanya and Arjuna's Devadatta. Then Bhima's hungry Poundra, King Yudhishthira's victory call, Nakula's nice tone, Sahadeva's gem bloom, each announced himself unique. King of Kashi, Shikhandin, Drishtadyumna, Virata, unbeatable Satyaki, Drupada, his sons-in-law, the five Pandavas, and power arm Abhimanyu revved, shook earth and sky, busted your sons' hearts. Armies all set, weapons about to clash. Under the hero Hanuman banner, Arjuna reached for his bow and paused. To Krishna, Sir, can we go to a vantage point between armies? Who's there to fight for evil Duryodhana? Who's sweet on evil Duryodhana? Chariot parked in no man's land in front of Bhishma and Drona and all the chiefs. Arjuna said, "See," and saw familiars, foster fathers and fathers' and fathers in law and uncles and teachers and brothers and friends and sons and grandsons, and said, "Pitiful, these people, war urgent, are my people. I feel drained, my mouth's dry, my tremble is me, my every hair in shock, my bow slips, I'm feverish. I can barely stand, my mind reels. All the signs are grave, no good can come from killing my own. Don't want to be a hero, don't need no empire. What's there to enjoy? What's the point of it all?" That's the beginning of the Gita.
I really love the momentum you give to the poem. It's a dramatic beginning. And what struck me as well, reading your translation, is the use you make of the page as well as part of this rhythm, as a way of creating again this kind of dramatic presentation at the beginning. I don't know if you can want to say something about your use of the page.
That's the thing that's been remarked upon most by people about I guess because they're so used to seeing four lines translating four lines, or a single line translating a single line. Whereas what I have done is taken different stanzas as cognitive units. What happens is if you're reading the Gita in Sanskrit, the experience that you get, um, that's what my focus was. So, for example, in chapter 7, when Krishna talks about who he is, he says, I am the origin, I am the end of the entire universe. It's all strung on me like pearls on a string. He uses asmi, asmi, asmi repeatedly. Asmi as in I am. And so what I did was can you see this? Yeah. So that's how I've laid it out. So the rest of it is you see it with your eyes, and then you read all of it together. So what I'm trying to do there is sort of re recapture the feel of the Sanskrit. The other thing is that you have to read sometimes several stanzas together to really catch them. So it's not necessarily always only one stanza, then another stanza. So in some cases, I've combined two or three stanzas, but I numbered them also, so you can refer to it. So it might be 2.41 and 2.42 are together, and I can move the parts around because it's the meaning that's important for me. Also, in Sanskrit, because it is because of the case endings, you can move the words around and you still should get the same meaning. So I've not necessarily followed exactly the same sequential order of like a list of nouns or whatever. Instead, I've gone with the rhythm. But within that stanza or within that cognitive unit, you will see all the relevant nouns are there, but they may be in a different order because I'm suiting the target language in order to catch the same tone. Yeah,
It's
so I've
also
used space on the page differently, and I think that is usually a little bit disconcerting for people who are used to very straightforward translations. Yeah.
it's also a very colloquial translation, and you have these phrases like, it's not a big deal, or, don't want to be a hero. And that was also very, very striking to me, and it made me think about, well, there's this kind of bigger question in translation, right? So how do so in your, one of your other volumes is called Kalidasa one of your other translations is called Kalidasa for the 21st century reader. And so I guess my question is, how do you think about translating for the 21st century reader, something like the Bhagavad Gita? Um, it's a really interesting question. It's something you talk about as well in your introduction to the Gita, where you say that previous translations have treated the text with so much reverence. It sort of takes away from the reading experience. Um, so yeah, so I wonder what maybe you can say a little bit more about that. How you think about the 21st century reader and what that reader needs from the translation of these texts, these Sanskrit texts.
Yeah, there are so many readers even today, so it's hard to say exactly who that 21st century reader is. But of course, for me, I'm the mirror of that when I write. Though, of course, under Larry, I did have a specific reader in mind. It was the general reader who was probably not really interested in going deep into the commentaries and reading all the footnotes, etc. They just, want to understand the meaning of the hymn. So yeah, there is thought as to who is that reader. I have to say that what happens usually when someone's translating, let's call it a classic, like an earlier text, an ancient text or a classic, is they imagine that the translation should sound classic. They think, and by that they mean something that should probably sound sonorous and formal and in a particular kind of language. And I think that's usually a mistake because, for example, okay, so take Kalidasa. you look at the translations of Kalidasa and you find that there's a very sort of a flowery kind of use of slightly older vocabulary. You feel like you're reading something from before, but actually you haven't. You've taken somebody from fourth century or whatever, and then put him in a Victorian poem, which is also not his era anyway. You know. So, and if you look at Kalidasa, he never thought of himself as some antiquated person. He thought he was a modern poet. In if you see the Malavika Agnimitram, the play, in that it opens with a character and the director talking to each other. The Sutradhar says, why are we presenting this like really contemporary uh, poet called Kalidasa? Why aren't we presenting classics like Bhasa and so on? So you can see that Kalidasa thought of himself as a very modern person who was breaking away from the past, and that is the sign of modernity. You know, so when translating a classic, I think the considerations have to be, what is the content, how is it best represented, and what is it you're trying to catch, and what is it that you don't want to include in it. Like all the footnotes, all the commentaries, how are they going to be woven in, and what is necessary for the narrative. Those are the considerations. And so I am writing for today's readers, and somebody else will come along 50 years later and do it again, and that's good.
It's interesting because you're writing for today's readers, and at the same time, you're very attentive to things like the sound of the original, because in all of your translations, you have a little introduction to Sanskrit pronunciation, how to pronounce the names, and so that's
Yeah,
interesting
no,
because
sound is the primary. I mean, it's the main love for me, is to catch the resonances, to catch the sounds. Um, Absolutely has to be there. The dhwani has to be there. Otherwise, and that's the reason why I love it. Also, that's why I love Sanskrit poetry. It just sounds like mesmerizing.
yeah, so it seems to me there's both this absolute fidelity to the original and its sounds, and then also this kind of irreverence where you're not afraid to present the text as a contemporary one. Um, that's very appealing. And so in your latest book, the latest work of translation, the Sanaria Larry, there you also have the Sanskrit text and
On the
and
left side, yeah.
the transliteration on the other side, and then so it's an interesting choice, to present to present the text like that in
Yeah, in
parallel.
that in that particular work, especially because people memorize Sundarlari. Memorization and repetition is supposed to be the whole mantra, the effect of the mantra. So that is like a spiritual activity on its own, and therefore it was very important to keep that and to present it. And then people may wish to know the meaning, which they can on the right side in a lyrical manner, and then on the left side they have the actual thing. So it's a complete book in itself in that sense. Yeah, that's actually how we're going to be doing the next Gita edition
That
later
was
this
presented
year.
like
We have the Sanskrit on the left side. Yeah, so it's a reference.
Yeah, so I had a question about mantra, and I think maybe you've answered it in part. You've talked about how you think about mantra in relationship to your poetry. But it's interesting coming back to your book on mantra. And so this is where you recount your extensive field work that you did on mantra as a practice and as an experience. But in that book, you say very clearly that mantra is not poetry, because poetry, here I'm quoting you, poetry comes from the world of human craft. Um, and yet you say your interest in mantra is the interest of a poet. It's because you're interested in sound and sound structures, and so your own responses to mantra are aesthetic ones. So I was interested in this attention mantra is poetry for you, and it's not really
Yeah, no,
poetry.
this is really such an interesting topic. Initially, I thought that there was aesthetics in mantra, okay? Because I would be listening. This was sometime in 2005 when I was living in an ashram, and I would listen to the Veda chanting, and I would ask myself questions like, Oh, wait a minute. Are there more like feminine endings in Sri Suktam? Why does Rudram sound like so militant and why does Sri Suktam sound mellifluous? What could it be? And, is there something to be explored at the level of poetics in mantras? But when I started going deeper into it, of course, I realized that is really not a parameter at all because mantras are considered natural forms, sounds that are actually already in nature and the cosmos. So it's like saying that seashell, to appreciate the aesthetics of a seashell, because every seashell is perfect. Like every leaf on a tree is perfect because it's a natural form, and that's how it is. Its existence and that form, everything goes together. That's how it is. So it's not like somebody can be credited with having made it like human authors. And in Veda and Tantra, which are supposedly Shruti, which is revelations, that is, they were heard. Some will say that, well, they weren't heard, they just passed on orally. That's why they're called Shruti. But practitioners really do not think like that. Practitioners consider that as something that exists in the cosmos and that is received by people in states of meditation. And so they receive these sounds. So, in the sense, it's a collaborative effort. The seer, the rishi comes from drish. Drish is to see. Rishi is a sage who has perceived this and is giving voice to it through the medium of his or her being, body, mind, everything. So it's almost like a collaboration. At the same time, it's a reception of something from somewhere else. You can say it's from an inner part of oneself. You can say it's from somewhere outside oneself. I don't know. Those are all question marks. But it's not considered a composition by an author. In fact, mantras are considered apaurushaya, which is authorless. So yeah, no, that's a fascinating thing. You will see that aesthetics are never discussed in mantras, even though like Soundarlari, for example, is in Shikharini meter. The number of syllables are fixed, and it's really fascinating how exact it is, and the Guru Laghu syllables, the long and short syllables. Guru is Laghu is more to do with weight. Yeah. Um, uh, those are exact, and every stanza is just beautiful. But we don't really, that's not a point. That's expected almost that it is going to be perfect.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, this was a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad you discovered your work.
Thank you, Alice, for all the time you spent with reading it and enjoyed it. Thank you.